Support WrestleTalk!
Order a t-shirt.
So here's a hot take. WWE's Backlash 2018 was a pretty awful show. Yeah, I said it. I dare to say the things on this channel that no one else is thinking. Okay, so pretty much everyone is in agreement that Backlash 2018 was a pretty lousy show. After the killer opening between Seth Rollins and The Miz, we were treated to be a star advert disguised as a Raw Women's Championship defense, a pedestrian match between Jeff Hardy and Randy Orton, Big Cass losing to Daniel Bryan, but beating him afterwards so no one got over, Carmella somehow out-wrestling Charlotte Flair to win clean, AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura again having a good match ruined by a rubbish finish, a pointless tag team match that undid Nia Jax's anti-bullying promo when the babyface victors beat up the losing heels after the match, and a main event that was so full of chinlocks people began to leave the arena during the match. Oh, and Bobby Roode shook his ass at Rusev. He's a former NXT champion. Not only was it a show with rubbish finishes and not that great in-ring action, it was detrimental to characters and stories. Wasn't the story that Carmella was an undeserving champion and not on Flair's level? So why is she beating her clean? Why build up Big Cass's return and push him and then have him tap out in seconds to Bryan? Why are we again teasing dissension between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn? Why did Samoa Joe brutally beat down Roman Reigns outside the ring and then spend the rest of the match trying to wear him down with rest holds? Backlash 2018 will likely win the worst pay-per-view of the year when all is said and done. Ollie Davis and I called it one of the worst shows WWE has put on in recent years. But was it the worst show ever, as many in the YouTube comments have tried to claim? To be less cynical and put a positive spin on this, let's look at some WWE pay-per-views that were actually worse than Backlash 2018. Call it a backhanded compliment if you will. Number 1, Great American Bash 2004. One of the early pay-per-view failures of the original brand split was that neither roster was deep enough to fill an entire card of worthwhile matches. Case in point, the Great American Bash 2004. While it had a solid and gruesome WWE Championship match between Eddie Guerrero and JBL, the rest of the card was filled with Kenzo Suzuki versus Billy Gunn, Luther Reigns versus Charlie Haas, Sable versus Tori Wilson, and Mordecai versus Hardcore Holly. The main event of the show was a bizarre encounter where The Undertaker defeated the Dudley Boys in a handicap match where Paul Bearer being drowned in concrete was on the line. And despite Taker winning the match, he allowed Bearer to be killed live on pay-per-view. Great American Bash 2004 is a bad show and, in many ways, worse than Backlash 2018. Number 2, Battleground 2013. Battleground 2013 is a show most likely everyone watching this video has forgotten, and for good reason. Similar to Backlash 2018, there was one great match on this card between the Rhodes Brothers and The Shield, with the rest of the card filled with the likes of the Real Americans versus Great Khali and Santino, Curtis Axel versus R-Truth, and CM Punk beating Ryback in a match that felt more like a sleepy house show outing rather than a pay-per-view bout. Not only that, but the main event of Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton for the vacant WWE Championship ended in a no contest when Big Show caused the DQ. In their review of the show, PW Insider said WWE owed its audience an apology. Battleground 2013 was a bad show and, in many ways, was worse than Backlash 2018. Number 3, Capital Punishment 2011. It's not just the name of the show that makes it worse than Backlash 2018. It was headlined by John Cena versus R-Truth for the WWE Championship. Although not the worst pay-per-view ever, its biggest crime is that it was so forgettable. Without looking it up, I couldn't recall another match on this card other than R-Truth being in the main event. Also, look at that poster. A boring show, and in many ways worse than Backlash 2018. Number 4, WrestleMania IX. I wanted this list to focus on more recent offerings to put things in perspective, but there's some pay-per-views you just can't ignore. WrestleMania IX was supposed to be the start of a new era for the WWF. The days of Hogan being on top of the card are over, and he's in a mid-card tag team match with Brutus Beefcake against Money Inc., with the main event being Bret Hart versus Yokozuna for the title. It's a new era with new and younger guys on top. This company is moving forward without Hogan as its main attraction. So how does the show end? With Hulk Hogan as WWF champion. It's also the show with Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez on the card. WrestleMania IX is a boring show with a backwards thinking conclusion, and in many ways worse than Backlash 2018. Number 5, Royal Rumble 2014. In January 2014, there was one man the WWE audience wanted to see get a giant push: Daniel Bryan. This was the result of WWE making the decision that despite being incredibly over with the crowd, Bryan was destined for a lower mid-card match against Sheamus at WrestleMania 30, so Randy Orton could be in the main event against Batista. WWE might tell you differently now, but that was the plan. Which brings us to Royal Rumble 2014, which seemed designed to off the WWE audience. Daniel Bryan lost his match against Bray Wyatt, and then John Cena and Randy Orton fought over the WWE Championship for what felt like the 9 millionth time. It was a match that if you closed your eyes now, you could almost call spot for spot. The Rumble match itself wasn't all that great either, with babyface Batista winning so he could face Orton on the grandest stage of them all, to a chorus of boos from the crowd. This was also the last WWE pay-per-view appearance of CM Punk, so it's got that going against it as well. What is interesting about rewatching this pay-per-view, however, is how cheered the then heel Roman Reigns was in the match. How times have changed, eh? Fans on WWE's Facebook page at the time called it the worst pay-per-view ever, a perplexing show and in many ways worse than Backlash 2018. Number 6, December to Dismember. Yeah, I'm counting this, it may have had ECW branding, but this was 100% a WWE show. After 2 killer one-night stand pay-per-views that reminded the mid-2000s wrestling audience why we all fondly remembered ECW in the late 1990s, WWECW promoted December to Dismember, a pay-per-view that was the first for the fledgling brand and should have been the first of many. But by the time the show came around, only 2 matches had been announced. 2 matches! The Extreme Elimination Chamber match featuring CM Punk, Rob Van Dam, Hardcore Holly Test, Big Show and Bobby Lashley, and a tag team match between Eminem and the Hardy Boys. Then on the night we got treated to bouts between Daivari and Tommy Dreamer, Balls Mahoney and Matt Striker, and Elijah Burke and Sylvester Terkay versus the FBI. ECW. To make matters worse, the show had been designed by Vince McMahon to sabotage Paul Heyman. While Heyman wanted to build the show around fan favorites CM Punk and Rob Van Dam, Vince wanted his favorite Bobby Lashley to win by beating the Big Show. So of course, Punk and RVD, who the fans actually liked, were 2 of the first 3 eliminated, and Lashley, who no one liked, was victorious. The crowd chanted for anything else other than the match, including rival promotion TNA. The show ended half an hour before it was supposed to as well. A disastrous show, and in many ways worse than Backlash 2018. But those are just a handful of shows we've picked out. As I said, I wanted to pick out shows from the last 10 years or so. There's a whole Diesel run as WWF champion you could look at. Many people might argue for Battleground 2017, but I personally found the Punjabi prison match silly fun. What do you think was a worse show than Backlash 2018? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, click the playlist to the left to check out other WrestleTalk opinion pieces. Support this channel by subscribing and pledge on Patreon for exclusive podcast content. I have been Luke Owen, and that was just my opinion.